Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Krishana. I'm a wife, mom to both a 3-year-old and a 2-month-old. I am also an exec in the media and campaigns department at a Black-owned agency. I am a recovering journalist and also a writer. And so this conversation is going to be all about the questions you need to ask a midwife before you pick one. So I had a home birth with a midwife back in July, and a few people have been asking me, the details on what kind of questions should you ask your midwife before you choose one. So let's jump right into it. To kind of preface and start this entire conversation, I just want to say that these questions are like your midwife interview questions, right? And so I would say like at least interview 2 to 3 midwives. Hopefully it's very easy for you to find midwives in your area. A lot of the time there's like Facebook groups about like midwives in your area, most likely, or maybe like you'll be able to search on Instagram. And so once you kind of have 2 to 3 people, line them up and schedule some time to do the interviews. And so we're going to kind of jump into like what I think are the best questions to interview for your midwife. And just as a quick side note, I had 2 different midwives for my babies. My first midwife was in the DC Baltimore area, and then my second midwife was here down in Georgia. So I've been through this process a few times, and these are the questions like that I feel like are the best questions to ask your midwife. So basically the main like categories of questions you need to ask are about prenatal care, the labor experience, the cost, the postpartum experience, and then some little miscellaneous questions as well. So first, we're going to jump into prenatal care. I have these questions written down, so if you see me looking off to the side, you know why. So the first question that I have here is like, how often will my appointments be scheduled? So it's important for you to know that like midwifery care is very different than care with the OBGYN. And so if you've ever had this is not your first birth and your first birth was with the OBGYN provider, like those schedules of appointments are not one-to-one. So it's important for you to know from this midwife, like how often should I expect to see you? How often are the appointments? And with that, where are the appointments? So as you know, with most OBGYNs, those appointments are in their office. However, most midwives will actually come to your home, or maybe sometimes you'll go to their home or their office, but many midwives will come to your home. And that's important too, because like if you're planning to have a home birth at your home, the midwife should come to your house so they get to know your layout, where you like to be in your home, etc., etc. So that's important. The next is like an easy one. What's going to happen in my appointments? Like what should I expect the flow for the appointments to be? And also like how long should I expect for these appointments? So again, if you've ever had a traditional OBGYN, those appointments are usually pretty quick, like 15 minutes tops. Like you're probably driving there and sitting in the waiting room longer than you are actually talking to your OBGYN. And in my experience, like my appointments with my midwife are probably like every time close to an hour at least. Like, and that's like probably like an hour from the time you actually like sit on the couch with me to an hour to the time you leave. And so the flow is definitely different. So you have to be able to plan around that as well. The next is like, do you offer any collaborative care with the OBGYN office? So some midwives operate totally independently. They don't sync up with any like hospital systems, but some actually do. So when I was researching midwives, some midwives had collaborative care where you can also go and have like joint appointments with the OBGYN that they already have a relationship with. And that way, you're getting like, parallel care. And if for some reason you decide like, oh, I really don't want to have a home birth, or if like there's some complication that comes up, like you have a relationship with the OBGYN who can take over that care. And then kind of the last one is like if they have any referrals for like genetic testing, if you plan or want to do that. So that's both like genetic testing as well as finding out the sex of the baby. So like, how can I get my labs done? Depending on what kind of midwife you have, whether or not they're a certified nurse midwife or traditional midwife or a certified practitioner midwife, like they may have different policies, procedures, thought processes about like genetic testing, etc. And so it's important to know, like, do you have referrals for me? And if you don't have referrals, like, and you plan to or want these things, what is going to be the process for you to get them? Next, let's get into cost, because we know that that is important. So most midwives do not take insurance, at least most like traditional midwives. Like there's usually no process at which you can use your insurance to cover it. So that means that you're most likely covering it out of pocket. Some certified practitioner midwives will allow you to go through your insurance to kind of like try to offset the cost. And then like many certified nurse midwives also do provide like some type of insurance option. However, like for most home births, you're usually not going to be able to get a certified nurse midwife depending on where you live. So what is very important for you to ask them is like, what is the cost? How much is this going to cost me to like basically have a birth the way I want to, whether it's at home, a home birth center, whether it's at home, a birth center, hospital, etc. And then do you have any payment plans? So like that money you might not actually need to pay, and that money might not be due upfront, right? And so is it like you have to pay this much money for like your whole deposit and then increments of X, or pay this much money up front, then a second deposit later? Do you barter for services? Because that's an important one. Like many traditional midwives, especially those in the South, will do bartering for services. So like let's say your partner is a mechanic, right? And you can afford to pay for half of the services with the midwife. It's like, I'm going to make sure that you get your oil changes, car tire rotations, and etc. else for free until you reach this certain amount to basically pay for these midwifery services. So please don't think you can't barter as well. Okay, so now let's get into labor. So how would they operate and engage with you in labor? So first is like, you want to know what their style of bedside manner is, right? So like, what can I expect from you? Are you a real like huggy person? Are you like a little standoffish? Like, I'm gonna let everybody else kind of like, be with you while you're going through your labor and transitions, but I'm just here to catch the baby. Like, what's your bedside manner? What's your temperament? Like, how do you vibe, right? Because every person is different. And I think so many times when we get OBGYNs, we don't think to ask this question. And so you get whatever you get in the hospital. But when you're going to be at your home and you have the opportunity to pick somebody who's like a perfect fit for you, it's important for you to find that, right? And so like, let's say you have family who like is not really feeling the fact that you're going to be having a birth at home, and you find out that you have like a midwife who is very like good with working with people whose families are like apprehensive or whatever, that's going to play into bedside manner, right? So it's like when your auntie or your mama is like stressed out because they're at the birth, do you have this type of midwife who's going to say like, I need you to calm down, leave the room, blah, blah, blah? Or do you have a midwife who, and that might work for some people, or do you have a midwife who's going to be like, it's okay, we're going to focus on the mommy right now, blah, 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 right? Like, there's no right or wrong, but it's important to know what you're getting yourself into. The next thing is, do they have any like typically recommended pain management approach for labor, right? And so depending on whether you have a certified nurse midwife, a certified practitioner midwife, or a granny midwife, they're all going to feel differently about pain management during the labor process. And they're going to have the ability to like reach into their medicine bags and do different things. And so it's important for you to know what is available to you, because I'm not going to bullshit you. Having birth with no epidural is nothing to play with. Like, it's not a joke, it's not a game, it hurts. But your midwife may have things that they do to help you the process. Also, more explicitly, you want to ask them if they offer like anything like laughing gas or something like that to help you with pain management. And then it's important to also ask them if they have completed training in neonatal resuscitation as well. So like, creator forbid something happens to your baby, while you're giving birth. Are they trained to be able to resuscitate a baby? Is important. Also, you want to know if they are trained in working with breech babies and have experience doing that. What you will find out is a lot of OBGYNs are scared of breech births and for whatever reason don't want to do it. And a lot of times will push for C-sections in that rationale. Okay, breech babies. So A lot of OBGYNs won't actually help to term breech babies. A lot of OBGYNs are no longer like training at practice and will most likely push you towards a C-section. However, many like midwives will help you birth a breech baby, and also mainly know how to term breech babies. So it's important for you to ask that question, because it's not your fault or your baby's fault if your baby is breech, but it's a reality and a thing that can happen. And so it's important to know like what your options are. And then also asking them if they are approved to work in any hospitals in case there's an emergency. So for example, this is mostly with like certified nurse midwives. They probably are certified and like attached to some hospital setting in your area. And so it's important to know like what hospital. So if you did have to be transferred for an emergency or because you want an epidural, whatever the case may be, like what hospital would you be transferred to based on like where they have preferences. And then, yeah, like just generally, if you wanted to be transferred, if they're affiliated with any hospitals. And like affiliated could also be like, do you like the care at insert hospital? Have you ever helped birth the baby there? Have you ever transferred there before, etc. The next one, and sometimes also very important, is like postpartum care. So, like what is the postpartum care plan for both me and for baby? And also, sorry, y'all, my 3-year-old is running around. So I do believe that you're not going to be able to hear them a ton, but you should be able to hear me. So let's get into postpartum care. So it's very important for you to ask a series of questions about what your postpartum care experience will be like, because most likely if you are having your birth with a midwife, you probably aren't going to have a traditional hospital setting. So you just want to ask them like, what is your postpartum care plan, both for me and for baby? So like, what should we expect? How long are you going to be here after birth? Like, what are you going to check on the baby? Are you going to weigh them, measure them, all that stuff? The other is like, how many postpartum visits can I expect? So like, how many times are they going to see you afterwards for postpartum? So if you've ever given birth in a traditional hospital setting, you'll know that like once you get discharged from the hospital, you don't see your provider again for at least 6 weeks. Usually somewhere around the 6 to 8 week mark. And that's typically not the case with midwives. Usually in at least the first 2 weeks after you had the baby, they come check on you and see you, which I loved. And so just important to ask them like, when will I see you after for postpartum care? And then you also want to know if they are trained in lactation. So some midwives also have like their lactation consultant certification. And so if you plan on breastfeeding, they can help you through that process. And then if they are not lactation certified or do not have they aren't a trained consultant, whatever the case may be, or like that's just not something they specialize in, then you can ask them if they recommend any consultants. So asking them, is there anybody in this area that you recommend a lot, that you work with a lot, etc. And then, one thing that I forgot in labor, which is like, do they support or allow for delayed cord clamping, and delayed bathing as well? So, and then there's also a few like little miscellaneous questions. So one is like, how long will you let a patient go past their estimated due date? So we know that like due date is actually an estimate. You kind of take like the last time you had a period, and like they calculate it and kind of try to figure out like how far along you are and when you're likely to have a baby. But the estimated due date can be off, right? Like especially if you're somebody who doesn't track your cycles often when you have sex, etc. So most of the time, most people will go up to 2 weeks post their estimated due date. So really you can have your baby, as far as like a baby being like fully done baking, anywhere between like 40 and 0, so exactly like 40 weeks to 42 weeks, right? And so anytime in between. And so it's important to ask your midwife how far are they comfortable going past your actual like due date. The next is like, at what point do you consider your patients or clients too high risk to work with? So like, if I'm having a lot of swelling, if my blood pressure is high, etc., like, are there any markers for you that would say like, unfortunately, we can't continue care together, and instead I will refer you to an OBGYN office? So it's just important to know like what those markers would be for a provider that you're working with. And then the last thing is like, do do they actually offer all the supplies necessary for home birth? So for example, with my first midwife, I had to pay separately from the cost of her services to create the entire birth box, right? So like the diapers and the liners and the like sheets and all those things I had to pay for separately. With my second birth, I would say like 95% of the things that I needed for birth were provided by my midwife, right? And that was included in the services, that was included in her services. And so it's important to ask that question, like, just so you know, what additional costs do I need to account for aside from like the actual cost of your services as well? Because that might, change if you decide to go this route, number one, or if you do go this route, what midwife you take. So I hope these questions were helpful. If you have any other like points of clarity questions, I'm so happy to answer them. So please put them in the comment section below. If there are any other things you want to know about like midwifery or home birth and my experience, I'm happy to answer them. So put those down below as well. If you haven't yet, please like this video and don't forget to subscribe. And if you or anybody you know is interested in having a home birth, please send this video to them. It's important that this information reaches the masses. Home birth may not be for everyone, but it's important for us all to be informed on what our options are. So thanks so much for watching. Have a good one. Peace, y'all.